word to wise. Grass only greener when it's fertilized. Gave them truth in these songs, they prefer to lies. Destiny beautiful, adrift in her purple lies. You can't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Ernie, Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Alright, today's video, we're going to be talking about Way of X number 4 by Cy Spurrier and Bob Quinn. And in this video, we're going to talk about how Krakoas Second Law is viewed among certain members of the mutant community and why it is a problematic rule in not so much what the rule dictates you can't do, but in terms of the statute of limitations of that rule and how willy-nilly it's enforced. We're gonna talk about all that and a little bit more right now, but first, if you wanna see more awesome videos like this one, tap that subscribe button, and if you enjoy the video, Hulk smash that like button because it really helps the channel out. That said, let's talk about Way of X number 4. The main thing that stuck out to me in this book, and it's something that I thought was very much overdue to talk about. Yes, we have hinted at and kind of danced around the idea of the second law of murder no man, kill no man, however you want to put it. We've looked at this law from so many different angles throughout the course of Dawn of X, Reign of X, even across some of the events and other little, ancillary books. But the thing is, we've never really discussed how this law is enforced. And one of the things that comes up in this book, there's a little story at the very beginning that I found at first to be something that I wasn't really sure where this was going, but by the time that the story got to its logical conclusion, this little fable that the character Marinette is telling us, we learn that this fable is actually mirroring the events that likely transpire between herself and Fabian Cortez. As we remember in the previous issue, when Marinette saw Fabian Cortez, she immediately lost it. Like there was something that happened, a trigger that set her off, and apparently, yeah, there's history between these two characters. We didn't really know exactly what it was, but apparently, in some way, shape, form, or fashion, Fabian Cortez took something from her. And when we think about this, it kind of lends us to the belief that very likely her parents may have been human, not mutant like herself, which is not that hard to believe considering that mutants come from humans. Not every mutant that is born comes from mutant parents. Heck, you can look no further than the 5-piece original recipe X-Men. All of them came from humans. Now, that said, Fabian Cortez, as we note in both his history and even in this book himself, where he talks about his disdain for humans and how he has no issue whatsoever killing them, in this little fable, this little parable, as it were, that we're told by Marinette, she talks about a tribe of people who at one point in time were beset upon by someone who very likely wasn't necessarily a trusted member of their group, but someone who was close. And this person killed someone that was close to who is ostensibly the main character of this parable, this girl who was allowed to flee out of mercy, and that she was forced to exist and to have to survive in what is probably some of the most dangerous conditions possible. And this is all reminiscent of Marinette's life, the fact that her parents were very likely murdered by Fabian Cortez, and this is what resulted in her living on the streets, and then ultimately how she became connected to the character Stacy X. Like, she was very likely a vagabond, a vagrant, someone who just was getting by, surviving on the streets. And then towards the end of this fable, during her time on the streets, during this time where she was just surviving, trying to get by, her people, they returned. They came back from the brink and they were strengthened. They became more than what they were initially. And this is basically a reference to Krakoa, how Krakoa, the mutants, had brought this land up and created this united front and now have a society that is the envy of literally everyone. But in order for her to come back, she must forgive the person who murdered her parents. The fact that this new entity, this new society that she has returned to has basically said, yeah, we're wiping the slate clean. Yeah, we're not going to condemn people for past violations. And that in order for her to return, she must forgive, and that all must be forgiven. And as she goes on to talk about how the girl didn't join in with everyone's revelry at the fact that they had achieved these great things, that she was not going to forgive, because in the end, it doesn't take back what happened. And this is what kind of leads us more into conversations about Sabretooth, the fact that when Kurt tries to defend the whole, second law of Krakoa, Legion reminds him that if Cortez did in fact kill her parents, he technically broke the law, even if it was a law that, didn't exist until well after the fact. And Legion brings up the idea of Sabretooth, the fact that Sabretooth killed a bunch of people. However, he didn't kill those people after the law was made. The law was actually made after the fact. Now, to go back into that, if you go back into House of X, yes, that is actually the case, but Magneto does actually point out that he is more wanting to condemn Sabretooth for disobeying orders, not so much killing people, which, technically is, a thing he did do. But that is still neither here nor there. The point of the matter is that law didn't exist until after the fact, and the Quiet Council created that rule on the fly just to kind of suit the moment. But in the end, all of this kind of goes back to, Marinette, the fact that, yeah, she doesn't want to forgive Fabian Cortez. She doesn't want to make peace with him. In all likelihood, she probably wants to see him dead and would probably be even happier if she was the one who actually did the killing. She even points out the fact that when Legion talks about the story that she told him that, it was a nice story. However, she tells him it's not a story. Not yet, because stories must have endings, and this has not ended yet. And we do know for a fact that Marinette is going to probably factor in pretty heavily into the next issue of Way of X, because at this particular point, yeah, she is just sitting on planet Arakko, the artist formerly known as Mars, and she's literally just sitting around waiting. Now, yes, we do know Nightcrawler does have a conversation with Fabian Cortez that does lead to him dragging Fabian to meet with Marinette and do what he says to basically engage in the thing that, he once again says that no true villain has ever withstood, and that is a meaningful conversation. But I don't think this conversation is going to go the way that Kurt thinks it's going to go, because, once again, Kurt is kind of pushing his own personal beliefs on other people, which is, I know, something that people don't want to agree with, but it is what it is. He is enforcing his own morality and his own religious beliefs on others about forgiveness and, all these other things. Marinette probably does not want to forgive him, and she has made it pretty clear that she very likely doesn't, and Fabian has made it incredibly clear that he's not going to change, especially if he is unrepentant in the face of blunder when he is dealing with Gorgon, basically plotting to unleash Gorgon's abilities at the height of his power as far as Fabian Cortez can boost him to kill a bunch of humans just for the sake of it. I'm pretty sure he's not going to care that he's going to be held to task over what happened with Marinette's parents. Now, given the nature of a story, I would not say it's out of the realm of possibility that her parents were in fact mutants, but I don't know. It seems kind of out of Fabian Cortez's depth to just randomly willy-nilly kill mutant parents of another mutant. He doesn't really seem to operate in that fashion. He seems more likely to want to kill humans than anything else, but once again, Fabian Cortez used to be on some shit back in the day, so you never know. He probably did actually kill her parents, even if they were mutant or human or whatever. That part actually isn't even really, honestly, that important to the whole story. The fact of the matter is, the important part is that he killed her parents. That is the thing you need to chew on. There's some other really interesting things going on in this book. I'm not going to delve too terribly deep into all of them, because some of them, honestly, either A, haven't bared fruit yet, or B, just aren't really worth talking about. The whole thing with Gorgon, yeah, Gorgon is still f***ed up. That's not changing anytime soon, and who knows how to fix it. This is something that probably won't be dealt with until the pages of Excalibur. I don't think we'll actually see Gorgon fixed anytime soon within the pages of Way of X, or much less any other comic. Until Saturnine is brought to heel, honestly, all resurrections are probably going to be screwed, though Fabian Cortez does bring up the interesting idea of just killing Gorgon and trying to resurrect him again, since he will now have died in, a place where other mutants normally die and come back okay. It would be interesting to see whether or not he did come back even worse or the same, or if he came back the way he used to be. That is actually a very interesting thing. I don't think it's actually going to be the case, though. There's also some interesting commentary on the character Dust, which, for those of you who do or do not know, the character Dust is one of those who was received in very different ways when the character initially debuted. There were some people who thought the character was the greatest thing since sliced bread. There were other people who thought the character was just okay. And there was other people who thought the character was incredibly problematic. And it just kind of depended where you fell in that when the character debuted. I'm one of those people. I just kind of fell in the middle. I thought that, Dust was an interesting enough character, but just okay at best in some regards. And I felt she had a pretty dumb name, though, by all standards. And considering who one of her co-creators were, I'm not surprised. That said, I do find it interesting that Legion also thinks she has a fairly dumb name. And what she's there to do, I think what she's there to do is more important than anything else. The fact that she is there to fix the botches that the Omegas created when they were terraforming Mars. We don't really get to know what all of them are, but one of them does have to do with not just the Olympus Mons, which is the volcano on Mars that has now been regularly erupting since the terraforming had occurred, but also the fact that the tides of sand and dust that are sweeping across the planet and destroying pretty much anything in its wake, well, that's why she's there. The other thing that I thought was pretty interesting in this is the conversation that Legion is going to have with his father, Charles Xavier. This one's actually pretty cool, if for no other reason than the fact that they actually are going to have a heart-to-heart, something that I don't think they've had in a while. And while this conversation, I don't really want to say much more about what happens within this conversation itself, because I feel this is something you should probably read for yourself, because it is a very interesting conversation in of itself, and I do feel as though it is something that is definitely worth reading. The point of the matter is what we learn from this conversation. Legion, for all intents and purposes, become more accountable, not only for what's going on with mutant kind as a whole, but also for himself. A lot of what Legion has done, the reason why he has the Zorns with him, we learn that the reason why is not necessarily because they're helping him maintain control over his personalities and keep him from going crazy, but because Legion has tasked them with killing him should he get out of control. Now, everything else beyond that, yes, it is incredibly tense because Charles knows that Legion knows who is haunting the minds of mutants on the island, and more importantly, Legion is not going to tell him because Legion feels like if he tells Charles that it's going to make the entity Onslaught even more dangerous, because as we know, if anyone would know how to defeat Charles, it would be Onslaught. And if Onslaught is truly back, as we know he is, the worst thing Charles could do is acknowledge the threat and try and face it head on. And even as they're having their conversation, Onslaught is feeding on the energies, the vibes, the wants and desires of everyone in the Green Lagoon, and is turning that into rage and negativity and hatred. And ultimately, Onslaught is actually able to manifest himself in the Green Lagoon. But fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, the Zorns are able to take him down and vaporizing everyone in the Green Lagoon, Charles Xavier included, which means there's about to be a ton of resurrections right now. And it sucks too, because it's not just going to be Xavier. We see characters like Dazzler and Pixie, Loa, Bedlam, Dazzler, Dr. Nemesis, Blob, and so on and so forth. All these other characters who are in the background just kind of hanging out, minding their own business, and then suddenly Onslaught has just turned them all on one another, and then suddenly it's all skull and bone. And now we see the level that you have to go to stop Onslaught. You literally have to destroy everyone and anyone that Onslaught can connect with, and more importantly, whoever he's using as a host, which is Charles Xavier. This is actually proving that Onslaught is still a high-key threat. He's not a character you can just look the other way. You're gonna have to face him head on, and just as Legion predicted, Charles is the least equipped and, in all affinity, the worst possible person to even attempt to try and take on Onslaught, especially by himself. This, of course, means that Xavier won't remember the conversation that they initially had, because he would not have been backed up at this point. At least one would imagine he would not have backed himself up at this point. But Charles is not going to remember the conversation he and Legion had. He's not going to remember that Onslaught is behind all this, and it only cost a couple of dozen mutant deaths. Now, initially, Legion was there to get a Krakoan flower from his father, but the reasons why he's getting it seems like what he is going to be trying to do is to build a temple not too far from the Olympus Mons to kind of create a safe space for for mutants away from Onslaught, which is probably not the worst idea in the world, but something tells me this is probably not going to work. This is probably going to backfire absolutely positively horribly, and who knows? It most likely will. But anyways, all that aside, that's everything that was going on that I felt needed a little bit of explanation in Way of X number 4. There was another thing too where they talked about the Outcast Gate, but we don't really get to know too much more about that. But something tells me this is gonna wind up being the new way that they handle mutants who are dissidents and mutants who have broken the laws of Krakoa, mutants arguably like Fabian Cortez. The Hole will probably not be the place they go, but the gate, the Outcast Gate, is probably where they will wind up landing. Though it does beg the question, how would you keep one out? How would you keep someone out that has gone through the Outcast Gate? Is there something that would make it to where once they cross through it, they would never be able to cross back through another Krakoan gate? Is that something that's on the table? We don't really know. It's not really talked about, but we do know that it is definitely something that is on the horizon, and we're probably going to learn a little bit more about it. We're going to learn about it anywhere. It'll probably be within the pages of Way of X. But anyways, if you enjoyed this video, Hulk smash that like button and make sure to share this video all over the internet and with all your friends so they'll know how you leveled up your comic book big brain in regards to Way of X and Reign of X. On your way out, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know what you thought about Way of X number 4. Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.